In September 2018, Deakin University hosted a 4-day event called the Anthropocene Campus Melbourne. As part of the event, 30 thinkers and artists from across Europe, North America, Asia and Australia visited the collections at Melbourne Museum and ScienceWorks with museum staff. Inspired by other SLAM events, they put together an evening performance of exciting and creative reflections that would reveal how our response to our past can inform our future.
Human beings have become actual physical and geological forces of nature. We can change the Earth so much that we leave permanent markers on it.
Going back to the Anthropocene, the Earth system scientists predict that if we don't actually take radical action to alter the way that we're interacting with the planet, we will shift the Earth into what they call a hothouse planet. So this window of time buried there in the coal of a hot rainforest period of time actually is like a temporal analogue. It's like a window as to what the future might hold. So it's looking to the past, to the future. And of course the irony is that it's in the coal, and it's the very burning of that coal, the excavating of that coal, the finding of the leaves that actually is tipping it. So to me there's a huge kind of irony in that story of excavating the coal to find the leaves that bode the future that we're creating.
We started with a tour through the marine invertebrate collection, and there we saw these jars of mollusks, starfish, sea spiders, all these various things. And many of these specimens were collected over 150 years ago, which relates to this particular colonial period of human ownership over nature and cataloging that really sort of describes the relationship of how the Anthropocene came to be. Another thing that really stood out was the bowerbird. So the bowerbird is this bird that collects bright blue objects and places them in its bower in order to attract a mate. Many of the objects that it uses now are plastics. So in this sense, the bowerbird is actually using plastics to facilitate its reproduction. This is very different from the small pieces of plastics that we saw that came from seabirds, in which the relationship is actually quite a harmful one that prevents it from eating and ingesting its other food that it needs to survive.
Used to seeing plastics as something diffuse, uncanny, throwing the shadow of a mute and ungraspable mineral destruction on everything that is warm and alive, we learn today to think of it as one more strand in a complex world weave, as a stitch to be dropped or taken up, and making some relationships and making others possible again.
We were shown lots of different kind of bird eggs, which exist in these incredibly intricate 19th century cabinets and drawers and chambers, so that was fascinating. I didn't realise it was such a hobby, or that these kind of objects that are now housed in museums were for many people it was a hobby collection, but they've become important sources of knowledge.
The most interesting thing I think I learnt about egg collecting or collecting museum specimens in general is how restricted it is in modern times, obviously for very good reason, because a lot of egg collectors were very passionate hobbyists and weren't necessarily conservationists. So they were taking a lot of egg specimens, which was obviously implicating a lot of bird populations, and potentially some bird species became incredibly endangered because of these collections.
And here it is, the last egg. Some of you might not have heard of this animal. It's called a bird. We think from the fossil record there may have been even 10 different types of birds living on the world. Can you imagine?
It was really great to go behind the scenes at Melbourne Museum. There's obviously so much back there, and what we saw today just scraped the surface of that, and museum staff know so much about what they do, and were really welcoming and very informative in what they had to tell us, and it helped us a lot with our presentation, not just in the actual, showing us the collection, but just in their perspective on the idea of museums and how important they are for the future, and how it's difficult to think about right now, the things that we're collecting now and that we're putting in museums now, how they're going to be important in the future. But that's why we need to preserve museum collections now, so that people in the future can research and use them and get value from them.
The future is working together in this kind of way. And this collaboration that we've seen today, it's not surprising that it's in a museum, because the museums have taken the absolute forefront of active work active work in communicating the issues of our age.